The Millionaire's Wife exposed, how one server's incredible act changed everything forever. Sarah poured steaming coffee into mismatched mugs, the familiar clang of cutlery punctuating the early morning chatter at the Maplewood diner. The scent of sizzling bacon and fresh biscuits filled the air, wrapping around her like a warm hug. It was a comforting chaos. She cherished regular customers sharing life updates, laughter echoing off the walls. Yet, beneath her bright smile, the weight of every dollar reminded her of her struggles as a single mother, juggling 2 jobs to provide for her kids, Ella and Noah. Each day felt like a tightrope walk, balancing their dreams against the reality of empty bank accounts and overdue bills. Another round of coffee, Sarah, called old Mr. Jenkins, his kind eyes twinkling. She smiled, pouring him another cup. Moments like these flickered with hope, but as she looked at her kids munching pancakes in a booth, a gnawing desperation shadowed her joy. Their eyes sparkled at the thought of a better life, one filled with shiny toys and fancy dinners, dreams she desperately wanted to fulfill. As the busy morning faded, Margaret, the town's glamorous socialite and wife of a millionaire, glided into the diner, exuding elegance. Sarah's heart sank, a stark reminder of how unattainable that lavish lifestyle felt. Margaret's effortless charm captivated everyone, but Sarah soon stumbled upon something that would shatter her perception. At first, it was just a whispered rumor, a flicker of something sinister behind Margaret's polished facade. Intrigued, Sarah began to dig deeper. Late-night thoughts turned into sleepless nights, as the truth unraveled like an old tapestry. Margaret was running an elaborate counterfeit scheme, exploiting desperate workers. People like Sarah. The realization punched her gut. The next morning, as she served her regulars, tension brewed beneath the surface. Each cheerful laugh felt like a knife twisting in her heart. What do I do? She pondered. The weight of her discovery felt monumental. Protect her children from the fallout, or stand up for the countless others unknowingly caught in Margaret's web of deceit? Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night, as Sarah tucked her kids into bed, they gushed about Margaret's lifestyle, oblivious to the dark truth lurking beneath. Anger surged through Sarah. How could she protect her children while allowing deception to thrive? She felt raw, torn between fear and fierce resolve. The diner became her sanctuary, where the comforting hum of conversation kept her core steady amidst the storms brewing in her heart. Days passed, tension unfurling until it exploded like a shaken soda can. Sarah found herself confronting Margaret in front of the diner, a crowd gathering, gasps echoing around them. Accusations flew, truths unraveled, and in that charged atmosphere, friendships dissolved and loyalties wavered. The weight of the town's collective judgment hung heavy. Would Sarah's brave stand serve justice, or would it ignite a scandal that could engulf them all? As Sarah faced Margaret, heart racing, she felt solidarity from the onlookers stirring in her chest. Danger loomed, but so did hope. In a world where economic struggles often exchanged morality for survival, could one woman's quest for justice ripple through her community, reshaping the very fabric of their lives? The air felt electric, a poignant question lingering: what would she choose amidst the chaos? The crowd seemed to hold its breath as the tension between Sarah and Margaret thickened like the syrup draped over the pancakes they both knew so well. Sarah's hands trembled, but she gripped the edge of the diner's counter like it was a lifeline. Margaret, ever the picture of composure, flicked her hair back with a confidence that clawed at Sarah's nerves. "You really think you can ruin me, Sarah? You have no idea what I'm capable of," Margaret said, her voice laced with steel. The laughter and chatter of the diner faded into an awkward silence, the patrons leaning closer, eyes wide. Sarah could barely muster a response. Fear and doubt wrestled within her, but she stood her ground. "Your charade ends today, Margaret," Sarah finally said, her voice firmer than she felt. "People deserve to know the truth." The words left her lips like a battle cry, igniting something in the onlookers. Whispers began to weave through the crowd, people shifting, sharing glances, some nodding in agreement. Margaret's smile faltered, and for a brief moment, vulnerability pierced her polished facade. "You don't understand what you're asking. This isn't just about me," she shot back, her tone now frantic. "Think of your children. The consequences could be severe." The truth hung in the air like the aftertaste of burnt coffee. Sarah's heart twisted painfully at the reminder of her children. They were the reason she had to find the courage to confront this woman, even if it meant risking everything. "You're right," she replied, swallowing hard. "But staying silent while you exploit others? That's worse." Gasps arose again from the crowd, and Sarah's resolve deepened. Each face she glanced at workers, mothers, fathers shared in her struggle, their collective hardship awakening a fierce determination in her core. "Sarah, let us go," a friend called from the back. But Sarah shook her head, unable to back down now. She took a shaky breath, glancing at her kids in the corner. Ella's innocent eyes held a spark of belief in their mother. Noah, unaware of the storm, continued to color happily on the table. They were her anchor. "So what's it going to be, Sarah?" Margaret challenged, crossing her arms tightly over her designer dress. "You expose me, you ruin lives. My husband won't sit idle." The fallout from this would be monumental. A wave of doubt swept over Sarah. Was she truly prepared for the chaos her actions could unleash? What if this backfired, impacting her family? But the clarity of her call to action shone brighter than her fear. "People deserve to know the truth, Margaret. The pain you've caused isn't going to vanish by pretending it's all fine," she pressed, her voice sharper, igniting a growing murmuring from the crowd. Suddenly, a voice broke through the soft but firm tone of Ms. Richards, the local schoolteacher. "She's right. We've all felt the impact of your deceit." A ripple of agreement surged through the diner, emboldening Sarah as she felt a swell of support around her. Feeling cornered, Margaret glanced around desperately before her eyes locked onto Sarah's. "You're a fool if you think you can win this fight. I won't let you." As she stepped back, Sarah sensed the tide turning. The realization struck her this wasn't just her fight anymore, it was theirs. But in the myriad of emotions, another thought crashed upon her like a wave. What would be the consequences if she pursued this path? Could she withstand the storm that lashed against the walls of their small community? Just then, an unexpected voice called out from the back of the crowd. "Wait!" The sudden interruption sent a hush through the diner. All eyes turned toward the door as a man stepped forward, revealing a familiar face. It was the town's local journalist, Greg, with his camera poised and a notebook ready. I think it's time we all heard the full story. As the air crackled with anticipation, Sarah's heart raced. What could Greg uncover? What consequences awaited her beyond her confrontation with Margaret? Would the truth set her free, or imprison her forever? Greg stepped into the diner, the weight of the moment rising like steam from a freshly poured cup of coffee. His presence felt like the spark of a lit fuse. He locked eyes with Sarah, nodding slightly, as if to say he stood with her. His camera, almost an extension of himself, pointed directly at Margaret. "Tell us your story, Margaret," he said, his voice steady and authoritative. The atmosphere, heavy with tension, shifted in an instant. Patrons leaned forward, murmuring amongst themselves, ready to hear the unraveling threads of this spectacle. Margaret, now exuding a front of anger, snapped back. "You think you can just walk in here and create chaos? This is not your movie, Greg. This is our community, and what you're proposing can destroy us." Yet the fear in her voice was evident, mingling with rage. It was a crack in her armor, a vulnerability Sarah had almost missed amidst the turmoil. "No," Greg replied calmly, "this is about what you've done to people here. You have used your power to manipulate and control lives. People deserve to know how they've been hurt. Sarah felt the knot in her stomach loosen just a little. There was a courage in Greg that mirrored her own. It filled the air with a palpable hope. She glanced at Ella and Noah again, their faces were tight with concern, echoing the chaos around them. She held tightly to this moment, willing herself to remain brave despite the uncertainty ahead. The diner was alive with whispers, a growing chorus of voices, each echoing the collective fear and pain that had simmered beneath the surface for far too long. Margaret had always been the untouchable figure, but now, in the glare of the truth, she seemed smaller, desperate. "I won't let you turn my life into a spectacle," Margaret cried, her voice trembling as she cast her gaze over the crowd. "What about your children, Sarah? Would you truly risk everything? What about the families that depend on me?" An uneasy silence settled for a moment. It was the classic confrontation, the cowardice hiding beneath the guise of responsibility. Margaret framed herself as a benefactor, a protector of those who needed her help. But deep down, Sarah understood the truth. It had never been about help, it was about control. "No more excuses!" shouted Ms. Richards again, her voice filled with a raw passion that broke the tension. "We know the lives you've destroyed, the families you've ripped apart for your gain. We can't keep living in fear of you." Greg moved forward, snapping photos, capturing the magnetic energy in the room. "Margaret, people are rising up to reclaim their community. Will you continue to hide behind your facade, or will you finally accept the truth?" Margaret flinched, her confident facade beginning to crack. The power she exuded was slipping through her fingers, and Sarah could see desperation paint her features. I will not be silenced," Margaret shouted, pushing through the crowd, her heels clicking on the floor like a countdown to her impending downfall, but Sarah couldn't let that be her only weapon. She stepped forward, letting the determined spirit propel her. "We're not here to silence you," she said, her heart racing but steady within her chest. "We want to end the cycle of fear. Our community matters more than your fear." The air around them buzzed with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The truth was a powerful force, and the winds of change had begun to swirl dangerously close. Greg lifted his camera, capturing Sarah's bravery, the faces of the crowd, the raw emotions swirling around them. He was there to document this defining moment. But in the back of Sarah's mind, another thought gnawed at her. Would this moment rewrite her story? What would be left for her and her children when the dust settled? "Enough!" Margaret's voice rang out, a mix of fury and fear. "You really think the truth will set you free? All it will do is destroy us all." In that moment, Sarah realized she was no longer just fighting for others, she was fighting for her family's future. But the uncertainty loomed overhead like a storm cloud, ready to unleash its chaos, and as Margaret took a step back, Sarah felt the bitter chill of doubt creeping back into her heart. Would this courageous act spell their salvation, or would it ignite a fire that no one could control? The question lingered in the air, hovering heavily like a storm waiting to break. The next step loomed large before them all. The diner's doors slammed shut as Margaret stepped back, her breath coming quicker, the weight of the room pressing on her shoulders. She looked like a cornered animal. Sarah saw the mask of entitlement begin to shatter, revealing the fear underneath. The tension was thick, almost tangible, as the crowd held their breath, waiting for the next move. "Do you think this will end well for you?" Margaret's voice trembled, but she straightened up, trying to reclaim some semblance of power. "You are playing a dangerous game, Sarah. This community has prospered because of me, and you are just a waitress stirring the pot." "No, Margaret," Greg interjected, snapping a shot. "This is about the truth of your actions. Prosperity built on fear isn't prosperity at all." He shifted slightly, framing both women in the shot, Sarah's defiance against Margaret's crumbling authority. Around them, murmurs rippled through the diner. A surge of support began to swell, building from the corners of the room. Faces turned towards one another, sharing glances that spoke volumes. This wasn't just about Sarah, it was about them all. Enough of this. Ms. Richards cried, stepping up beside Sarah with fists unclenched, but her resolve shining bright. We know who you are, Margaret. We've watched you manipulate, control, and destroy. There is no saving that anymore. We want our voices to be heard. Sarah felt strength rise in her chest. She nodded at Ms. Richards, a silent pact of unity. Together, they embodied a wave of revolution that could no longer be contained. Margaret's eyes flared with anger, then desperation. And who will take my place? She shot back, her voice cracking. You think it will be better without me? You'll regret this, just wait. That's not true. Someone shouted from the back, voice strong and unwavering. We're not scared of you anymore. The crowd erupted in agreement, rallying behind Sarah and Ms. Richards like a storm gathering force in that charged moment. Sarah could see their community's fracture lines deepen, but she also felt a flicker of hope. They were ready to step into the light, to reclaim what had been taken from them. Margaret, Sarah said, her voice firm but compassionate, this isn't just about you. It's about all of us who have suffered because of your choices. If you truly care about anyone, you need to listen. Stop hiding behind your walls. Margaret's bravado wavered as she looked around, the crowd's faces a sea of defiance and determination. The protective veneer she had floated behind was slowly dissolving. Perhaps this isn't a loss, Sarah added, the weight of her words heavy in the air. Maybe this is your chance to change, to step away from the shadows. It's never too late to make amends. A flicker of something fear, regret, maybe even a hint of humanity crossed Margaret's face. Was there a part of her that yearned for redemption? The diner, usually a place of comfort, overflowed with a motive force stronger than revenge. It buzzed with renewal. Change is messy, similar voices chimed in, but worth it. Greg captured every moment on camera, the expressions, the shifting tides of emotions. He could feel the pulse of something monumental unfolding. But as Sarah stood there, the dread of what might come next wrapped around her heart once again. What if this didn't lead to the light at the end of the tunnel? What if the chaos Margaret threatened came rushing in, suffocating them all? Margaret stood silent, the storm of emotions playing out in her eyes. But before Sarah could breathe a sigh of relief, Margaret drew in a deep breath and squared her shoulders. You think you can confront me and I'll back down? She hissed. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The words hung in the air like a ticking clock, each second rekindling the tension pulsing between fear and liberation. Suddenly, the unthinkable happened. The ground shook, the diner illuminated by flashes of lights outside. What's happening? Noah cried, gripping Ella's hand tightly, and in that heartbeat, with all eyes fixed on the door, Sarah realized that this was only the beginning of their fight. Whatever lay ahead, they would face together. But was their unity enough to withstand what was coming next? She could only wonder as she steadied her breath, clenching her fists at her sides. The very foundation of their existence was about to be tested, and only time would reveal the price of truth. The lights outside flickered with an urgency that mirrored the chaos inside the diner. As the rumbling intensified, Margaret's bravado faltered further. The crowd was a tempest of emotions, fear mingling with exhilaration. Sarah's heart raced as she glanced around. Faces familiar, strong, and determined gazed back at her, united against a fear that had haunted them for far too long. What's happening? Whispered Ella, her eyes wide with dread, still gripping Noah's hand. The din of uncertainty thickened the air, transforming the diner into a crucible of collective anxiety. The once familiar place had mutated into a battleground of ideologies. Was this an awakening, or were their fears materializing in the most violent of ways? Outside, sirens wailed, cutting through the hum of conversation, heightening the tension. Just stay calm. Ms. Richards shouted, attempting to rally the group. Whatever happens, we face it together. Her voice resonated with power, instilling a sense of purpose that everyone needed. Margaret stood frozen, eyes darting between the crowd and the outside chaos. "This is your fault," she spat, bitterness lacing her words. "You think you can take me down? But you have no idea what I'm capable of." With every accusation, her anger peeled back layers of her carefully constructed facade, revealing more of the woman underneath, the one who thrived on control and intimidation. But was there a glimmer of doubt lurking within her? Sarah watched as Margaret's expression twisted from rage to confusion, the cracks deepening in her once ironclad confidence. Could it be that Margaret was realizing, for the first time, that power built on fear was crumbling before her very eyes? "Margaret," Sarah interjected, urgency flooding her voice, "your threats don't scare us anymore. You've lost the grip you thought you had." Just as she spoke, the chorus outside reached a fever pitch. The ground trembled again, rattling silverware on the tables and sending shivers down everyone's spines. "We can't let her intimidate us," Sarah pressed on, summoning all her courage. "We've been silent for too long. No more. No matter what happens, we're standing strong." A wave of agreement washed over the room. People roared their support, voices rising in 1,000 defiant affirmations. Sarah could hardly believe the swell of unity, the fear transforming into strength for the first time in ages. And then, amidst the uproar, Margaret took a step back, her expression now shifting from anger to fear as she grappled with the reality that surrounded her. The door slammed open, and in rushed a cadre of first responders, their presence demanding immediate attention. The atmosphere crackled with uncertainty, tension snapping like a tight wire ready to break. Margaret, once a lioness, stood exposed, a mere woman, stripped of pretense, facing not just the crowd, but the remnants of her empire. "What are you going to do?" Sarah called out, piercing the charged silence that had fallen over the group. "Will you choose to fight the change, or will you embrace it?" Margaret's gaze shifted toward the door, where the sirens wailed like a clarion call, reminding her of the world she had tried so hard to manipulate. In that aching moment, Sarah felt something shift inside herself. The weight of the fight ahead pressed against her, but the tremor of hope thrummed through her veins. This was their moment, this was the dawning of something new. The first responders scanned the diner, eyes landing on Margaret. "Ma'am, we received reports of a disturbance. Is everything all right here?" One officer inquired, his voice a steady anchor amid the storm. Margaret's mouth opened, her next words crucial not just to herself, but to everyone in the room. What would she admit? Would she cling to her twisted version of reality, or recognize the tempest of change swirling around her? As the weight of the moment hung in the air, Sarah felt the pulse of anticipation quicken. Whatever choice Margaret made would echo far beyond this diner, reshaping their community forever. And in that suspended breath, one question lingered: when the moment of truth arrived, would Margaret reveal the woman behind the mask, or would she succumb to the darkness once more? Margaret's throat tightened as she stared at the officer, his gaze unwavering and full of authority. The electricity in the air seemed to crackle with anticipation. All eyes were on her, the room pulsing with a collective breath held tight, waiting for her next words. A fracture appeared in her steely exterior, hinting at the turmoil beneath. "Nothing's wrong," she finally managed, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her confidence. A flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Could she really bamboozle them all again? That nagging question gnawed at her, and for the first time, she felt the scales of power tipping away from her favor. "No more lies, Margaret!" someone shouted from the back. It was Tom, his voice breaking through the haze of fear and uncertainty. "You can't keep pretending everything's fine. It's time to face the truth." The crowd murmured in agreement. Each face reflected a mixture of fear and hope, and Sarah clutched her own hands together, wishing desperately for the courage to keep pushing. "This is our chance," she shouted, her voice full of fervor. "We've been silenced for too long. The truth can't be buried anymore." Margaret shifted uncomfortably, realization dawning on her that her fortress of control was becoming a crumbling ruin. The first responders stood ready, watching her every move. The weight of responsibility for her actions hung heavily in the atmosphere. Was she prepared to accept it? In a moment that felt suspended in time, Margaret's eyes darted to the door again. The chaotic sounds from outside rang in her ears like an ominous drum, a constant reminder that the world was changing whether she liked it or not. Could she be the catalyst for change, or would she remain frozen in her fearful grasp? She started, her voice barely above a whisper. The words were tangled in her throat, and suddenly, uncertainty erupted into a frantic storm within her chest. I didn't mean for it to get this far. She imploded under the weight of her own machinations, her kingdom built on deception collapsing before everyone. A flicker of hope ignited in Sarah's heart. This could be the moment. Margaret, if you take responsibility now, things can start to heal. People will forgive you if you're honest. Margaret shook her head, glancing at the faces of those she had once wielded power over. You think it's that easy? That I just walk away from all of this? Her voice cracked sorrowfully. I've lost so much already. The crowd's tension shifted to compassion, recognizing the real woman buried beneath layers of greed and manipulation. No longer was it Margaret against the diner, it was a wounded leader against a resilient community. Just then, a voice broke through the emotional haze. It was Ms. Richards, stepping forward like a beacon amidst the chaos. We're not here to tear you down, Margaret. We're here to help you rebuild. A murmur of agreement echoed through the diner. Sarah felt the collective heartbeats join into a rhythm of solidarity. Rebuilding was possible. Margaret's expression softened, surprise mingling with the vulnerability that revealed itself. Tears brimmed in her eyes, and for a fleeting second, it felt like a glimmer of light pierced the darkness that had held her captive. But would she accept the help extended to her, or would old habits die hard? The air thickened with suspense as the world held its breath, waiting for the swept-up tide of change to crash against an unrelenting shore. Will you choose to embrace the truth? Sarah whispered, eyes locked onto Margaret, her heart racing with the gravity of this moment. Or will the shadows swallow you whole? At that pivotal intersection, the diner vibrated with questions threading the fabric of their lives. This was a moment neither could escape. Two paths diverged, and the choice would determine their shared fate. What would she choose? Would Margaret step into the light, or retreat further into the shadowy depths of denial? The silence in the diner was deafening. Every pair of eyes fixed on Margaret, holding their breath, as if the very air was poised to shatter with her next words. Time seemed to stretch out infinitely, resonating with tension like a taut string ready to snap. Margaret's hands trembled at her sides, the weight of her choices pressing down like a pressing storm cloud. She could feel her heartbeat echoing in her ears, drowning out the outside chaos, a reminder of the world she had tried so hard to control. In that moment, the truth felt like a loaded gun, and she was not sure if she had the strength to pull the trigger. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about them, her community who had trusted her. She had built walls around her heart to protect herself, but they were starting to break down. Could she rebuild the trust that had crumbled to dust? She began, her throat constricting again. Images of her past choices flashed before her, like a distorted slideshow of regret. Did she dare to share the reality she had fought so hard to hide? Did she want to expose her vulnerabilities? Just say it. Tom shouted, frustration simmering beneath his skin. We all deserve to know. It's now or never. His words were like fuel to a fire, igniting something deep within her. It was time. She had toyed with their lives for too long, danced in the darkness of deception, and each second she hesitated felt like a missed chance for redemption. Everything she had built was teetering on the edge. The tension in the diner shifted from anger to fear. A contemplative murmur swept through the crowd as they sensed she was about to take a step into the unknown. Okay, Margaret took a deep breath, steadying herself. The time had come to fuse her past with her future. I never wanted it to get this bad. There were pressures to maintain this image, to keep things running smoothly. But I lost sight of what really mattered. I hurt people. Gasps erupted, but she pressed on, a flood of emotions bursting forth. I lied to protect myself. I didn't realize how those lies would bend and break those I cared about. I've spent too long hiding behind falsehoods, and I'm so sorry. She could see the surprise etched on their faces, confusion mingling with something she hadn't expected understanding. Sarah's eyes softened, her expression one of compassion rather than judgment. Margaret, Sarah spoke, her voice gentle, thank you for being brave enough to say that. We can all see it now. We can begin to heal together. But Margaret's thoughts suddenly spiraled. What if the healing didn't come? What if her words were met only with resentment? I want to do better, she whispered almost inaudibly. But I don't know how. By being here, you've already taken the first step, Ms. Richards replied, stepping forward once more, the warmth of her presence like a safety net. Admitting the truth is hard, but it's also freeing. You're not alone. We'll help you rebuild. The din of supportive voices around her crescendoed, but a small seed of doubt remained lodged deep in her heart. The world outside, with its relentless chaos, felt closer than ever. Change was in motion, but would she have the strength to follow through when the storm finally broke? Margaret took one last look at the faces surrounding her, vivid emotions etched in every line, hope shimmering through the fabric of despair. Could they really work through the rubble of her mistakes? The question hung heavy in the air as she wrestled with her own readiness to embrace this new life. But before they could congregate in their shared hope, a distant commotion rang through the diner. A voice, urgent. The door swung open, revealing a shadowy figure silhouetted against the sunlight, gasping for breath. Help! The stranger shouted, face contorted with fear. You have to come quickly. There's been an accident. Margaret's heart raced. The moment of truth, her moment, could easily be overshadowed. Would she rise to the occasion and embrace help when it was needed most? Or would she continue to hide, frozen in confusion? The choice was no longer just hers, it belonged to them all. What awaited behind that open door could change everything again. The diner erupted into chaos. Chairs scraped back, and people rushed toward the door, their eyes wide with concern. Margaret stood frozen for a heartbeat, caught between her need to confront her truth and the urgent plea of the stranger. Someone's hurt. The figure gasped again, desperation clawing at their voice. Margaret could see now that it was a young man, his clothes grass-stained and torn. Frantic breaths came in shallow bursts as he tried to collect himself. Tom pushed through the crowd, his voice steady yet filled with determination. Margaret, we can't just stand here. We have to help. He turned to the young man. Where is the accident? The stranger pointed down the road, his gaze shifting nervously. At the bend. A car flipped over. The driver might be trapped. We need more hands. A wave of fear washed over Margaret. She couldn't ignore this. Not now. Not after standing before her community and attempting to embrace change. That light flickering in the diner couldn't dim under the weight of another tragedy. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Okay, she said, her voice firm. Let us go. Everyone, we can do this together. Tom nodded, rallying the others, and soon the room turned into a flurry of movement. People rushed for their coats and scarves, ready to assist. Margaret felt the pulse of newfound resolve surge through her. Each step they took toward the door felt like uncharted territory, but she was no longer afraid of the unknown. She was embracing it. As they hurried outside, the dusky sky painted a somber backdrop to the unfolding drama. Voices strained against the chilly air, the sounds of panic flowing like a river. Margaret's heart raced, not out of fear but out of purpose. When they reached the bend, they found the car a crumpled mass of metal and broken glass, tires still smoking. The sight was harrowing, but the driver's cries for help pierced through the fog of shock. She nearly faltered, but she couldn't. She had stepped into the light and couldn't back down now. Keep calm. We're here to help. Margaret called, her voice carrying over the chaos. A few townsfolk flanked her, already assessing the situation, but it was Margaret who pushed forward, her hands shaking yet sure. The driver, a middle-aged woman, was trapped inside, her leg pinned by twisted metal. Tears streamed down her face, mingling with dirt and blood. Margaret knelt beside her, heart pounding as she looked into the woman's terrified eyes. At that moment, everything inside her shifted. "I'm right here," Margaret said, compassion spilling from her voice. "We're going to get you out. Just breathe, okay? We're going to take care of you." The woman's eyes widened, focusing on Margaret as if she were a lighthouse in a storm. More townsfolk arrived, forming a chain of support. They worked together, voices solid and unwavering, each person a crucial part of the effort. As they struggled to lift the vehicle, Margaret felt strength radiate from those around her. Each push and heave echoed her own journey towards redemption. They had come together, not just to save a life but to mend the frayed ties of their community. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, with a tremendous effort, they managed to pull the woman free. Relief mingled with exhaustion. The crowd erupted in cheers, an overwhelming sound of unity and triumph, but as the driver was whisked away in an ambulance, Margaret felt her chest tighten again. The weight of her own truth loomed large. Here she was, standing tall in the face of a crisis, yet she knew she still had so much to face at home. "If I can do this," she whispered to herself, "then I can confront my past." As she turned to rejoin her friends, the memory of the diner flooded back the eyes that had watched her, the hope that had sparked anew. With every step, she began to fully grasp the power of community and responsibility. And just as they began to walk back toward the diner, ready to heal, another voice called out from the tree line. "Wait! There's something you all need to see." Margaret's heart sank. Was she ready for more revelations, or would this next turn alienate the very people she had just begun to reform bonds with? A sense of dread filled her, but it was overshadowed by a flicker of determination. "Let us find out together," she murmured, her pulse quickening once more as a new challenge loomed on the horizon. Margaret glanced toward the voice, her mind racing. The stranger, the one still hidden among the trees, beckoned them with a frantic wave. She felt Tom's hand on her shoulder, steadying her, grounding her in the storm of uncertainty. "What if it's more bad news?" she whispered, half expecting the worst. The thought made her stomach churn. "Let us find out," Tom replied, his voice firm but gentle, echoing her courage. The crowd, still buzzing with the adrenaline of their recent triumph, began to shift uneasily. With cautious steps, they approached the figure. The fading light created a surreal atmosphere, shadows stretching long as they drew near. And as the outline of the man came into focus, Margaret's heart sank. He was familiar but not entirely in a good way. It was Jake, the town's local troublemaker, known for stirring up gossip and discord. "What is it?" Tom demanded, trying to keep control of the situation. "There's something going on. Something big." Jake's eyes darted around, filled with a mix of excitement and dread. "I overheard something at the diner before the accident. It's about Claire and her husband." Margaret felt her pulse quicken. Claire was the very woman who had just been freed from the wreckage. She was well-liked, spirited, a bright spot in the community. What could Jake possibly know? "Spill it already!" Someone near the back shouted, impatience seeping into the crowd. "Claire's husband is involved with some shady stuff," Jake said, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "I heard he's mixed up with those guys who come into town selling things. You know, the ones no one trusts." Margaret's heart sank further. Suddenly, the sense of victory over the accident felt overshadowed by this new revelation. The community had already rallied around Claire. Was it possible that the same woman they had just saved was hiding deeper troubles beneath her warm smile? "What do you mean, mixed up?" she asked, her own voice trembling as urgency threaded through her. "I can't share details here," Jake rushed. "But if you care about Claire, we need to talk. It's serious. And it will affect everyone in this town." Margaret felt a tightness in her chest, She was back under that weight she had almost freed herself from. This was not what she had hoped to find. Would this revelation pull the threads of their fragile unity apart? "Let us go somewhere quiet, away from prying ears," Tom suggested, sensing the tension in the air. A few townsfolk murmured in agreement. The urgency was palpable, but unease bubbled up as they moved away from the gathering, leading some to follow in concern, while others chose to linger behind. As they huddled together near a cluster of trees, the chill of the evening air settled around them. Margaret could see the faces of her friends, concern painted across their brows. "Tell us what you know, Jake," Tom urged, maintaining the authority of the moment. With tentativeness, Jake launched into his story, but Margaret's thoughts began to race ahead. What did this mean for Claire? What did it mean for her own standing in the town? As much as she wanted to help, daring to strike at the heart of someone's home, especially now, felt risky. Jake's voice faded in and out as she contemplated the unraveling thread of her community's fabric. This didn't just affect Claire, it would ripple through everyone. A knot formed in her stomach. Before she could process it all, a creak echoed from behind. The faintest sound of rustling leaves caught her attention, and her blood ran cold as she turned. "Someone's there," she whispered, gripping Tom's arm tightly. The boy's truth could easily twist into something dangerous, and the shadow to her side might take them all by surprise. What if this new danger opened wounds too deep to heal? What if they weren't just uncovering secrets, but opening Pandora's box right in the middle of the fragile bonds they had just begun to build? Margaret barely dared to breathe, her pulse quickening even more. Who else was listening? And would they emerge stronger or destroy everything she had fought so hard to create? "Let us change everything, shall we?" she thought, preparing herself for a confrontation she didn't foresee but knew was coming. The tension in the clearing morphed into a living entity, pulsing with unsaid words and unexpressed fears. Margaret's breath quickened, as shadows danced in her peripheral vision. If there were more eyes watching, would this change her fate yet again? The whispers of doubt began to swirl, but they were drowned out by a pulse of determination. "I have to protect this community," she thought fiercely. "Whatever comes next, I need to stand my ground." "Jake, keep talking," Tom urged. "Tell us what you know." The young man glanced around nervously, and then took a deep breath. "I overheard Claire's husband, Mark, planning something bad. I can't give exact details, but it sounded like he was about to drag the whole town into a mess. You know how he is always flashy, always looking for a big score." Margaret felt the air momentarily leave her lungs. The very moment they had rallied to free Claire from danger, she now faced the grim possibility of her husband dragging her deeper into it. "This isn't just gossip," she said firmly, the pieces clicking painfully into place. "We need a plan. This is our chance to stop it before it spirals out of control." An uneasy murmur rippled through the group as they exchanged concerned glances. The weight of this revelation was heavy, but the momentum they built with Claire's accident ignited a flame of urgency. "I don't want to lose this community again," Margaret declared, her voice steadying even amidst uncertainty. "We've fought too hard for our voices to be heard. We can't let this shadow eclipsing us take hold." "Agreed," Tom said, his eyes shining with resolve. "Let us gather everyone and let them know what's happening." The idea hung in the air, a subtle undercurrent of commitment. With Margaret at the forefront, they could turn this into an opportunity, a chance for the community to unite against something that threatened their new beginning. Bravely, Margaret stepped toward the wood's edge, heart pounding in her chest. "Everyone! We need your attention," she called, projecting power into the gathering twilight. A few familiar faces stepped forward, curious and anxious. "We've uncovered something troubling involving Claire's husband, a serious concern that could hurt us all." Gasps erupted, surprised expressions swarming the small crowd. But she didn't relent. "This is our chance to reclaim our community. We won't back down just because we're anxious. Fear has cost us too much already. We deserve to stand strong together." The power of courage was infectious. People began nodding, aligning their purpose with hers, dispelling their earlier doubts. They were ready. As she glanced at the sea of faces, she felt a rush of warmth. Ms. Richards stepped forward, her voice unwavering. If there's any truth to what Jake says, we'll need to confront Claire and Mark together. We can't let anyone be silenced anymore. We deserve the opportunity to heal. Heads bobbed in agreement. Their urgency surged, a collective determination ready to shoulder the burden of accountability together. Before long, as they walked back toward the diner, approaching the familiar buzzing warmth, apprehension mixed with excitement built up in Margaret's chest. This could shift everything. It wasn't just about confronting a shadow, it was about facing their fears, reclaiming their power, and rippling hope through their community. Upon arriving back at the diner, the atmosphere was charged. Fear had turned to empowerment, and the recent act of unity had ignited a fierce determination. Time to show up for ourselves, Margaret said, taking charge. We will stand for each other, and together we'll reach Claire and Mark. As they sorted out their plan, faces lit with resolve, Margaret felt her entire life shifting. Each person around her had become a piece of the mosaic, a blend of strength, love, and laughter that held the promise of renewal. And so, they charged forward, fueled by newfound courage. Together, they found Claire, pulled her away from doubt, and propelled her toward the light of honesty and redemption. Through each hurdle, they learned to trust themselves and each other again. As the wind rustled through maple trees, it seemed to whisper tales of change and hope. Margaret's heart brimmed with the understanding that true strength emerged not from hiding in fears but from rising together, united in defiance and love. Their shared stories shaped their bonds, as they stood before challenges, no longer merely seeking survival but affirming their unwavering resolve to build a brighter future. They had become luminaries in a world long shaded by uncertainty, proving that every broken path could be remade with courage and compassion. The road ahead might still be rocky, but they now strode confidently toward the dawn of a new era, ready to embrace the complexities of life, the beauty of second chances, and the promise of recovery. Hand in hand, the end of one chapter opened into a fresh beginning. And with their hearts aligned, Margaret and her community felt ready to welcome whatever came next, which would certainly be brighter than anything they'd ever known before. Now, it's up to you. Don't let this moment slip away. You need to subscribe now to witness the next incredible transformations. Hit that like button to show you care about bringing stories to life and help us feed the algorithm. Comment below with your thoughts and feelings about this powerful ending. And for the love of hope and change, share this video immediately with at least 5 friends who need to stand up and believe in the power of community. Don't wait not even one more second to show the world the strength of coming together.